Hey everyone. Tonight we don't ride into battle with swords drawn, but with smoke curling inside a shaman's tent. The drum beats pound, herbs crackle in the fire, and a nomad inhales until his eyes roll back visions of wolves, gods, and endless skies flooding his mind. Out on the frozen steppe, warriors gulp fermented mare's milk, children are silenced with opium syrup, and even horses stumble drunk on Airag. The Mongol Empire's riders conquered half the known world. But behind the legends of steel and blood was a hidden army of drugs, cannabis burning in golden cauldrons, mushrooms turning rituals into madness, and opium bricks traded along the Silk Road. These weren't just medicines, they were weapons, comforts, and curses, binding entire tribes in haze and hunger. If history's forgotten vices fascinate you, hit like and subscribe. And tell me what's the strangest survival trick from history you think deserves to be uncovered now. Saddle up and follow me into the smoke-filled steppe where empire and addiction rode side by side. You are there, in the quiet heart of the steppe, where the wind whispers tales through tall grasses. But tonight, a different sound draws you closer, a low, rhythmic thrumming that vibrates through the very ground beneath your feet. It emanates from within a modest, felt yurt, bathed in the soft, flickering light of an internal fire. This isn't just a dwelling. It is a sanctuary, a bridge between worlds. As you approach, the air around the yurt thickens, carrying the rich, earthy scent of burning herbs and resins, a fragrance both ancient and deeply mysterious. Step inside, if you dare, into the warm, enclosing embrace of the felt tent. The drums are not merely beating, they are thundering, a primordial rhythm that resonates in your chest, a pulse that mirrors the wild heart of the land itself. You see them, the shamans, their faces etched with the wisdom of countless sunrises and the stark reality of survival on the vast plains. They sit, eyes closed or gazing intently into the dancing flames, their breath slow and deliberate. With each inhale, they draw deep on the thick, swirling smoke that rises from a small, ornate brazier placed reverently at the center of the space. It's a haze that cloaks everything, softening the edges of reality, inviting you to forget the world outside. For the Mongols, this was no mere smoke. This was the very breath of Tengri, the boundless sky god, the giver of life and fate. They believed that through this ethereal doorway, the shaman could transcend the mundane, leaving their earthly form behind to commune directly with the divine. You watch as the shaman's body begins to sway, gently at first, then with increasing intensity. A tremor runs through their frame, growing into profound shaking, even convulsions. These aren't seen as signs of distress, but as sacred manifestations, the unmistakable evidence of divine possession, of a spirit taking hold, guiding the shaman on a perilous journey through the cosmic realms. Centuries later, in the stillness of archaeological digs, a profound secret was unearthed from the ancient, frozen burial mounds of Pazyryk, nestled deep within the Altai Mountains. Here, in tombs dating back to the 5th century BCE, treasures lay preserved not just gold and silk, but bronze cauldrons, heavy with history. And within those cauldrons, faint but undeniable traces remained: THC, the active compound in cannabis. It confirmed what the whispers of time had hinted at. Cannabis, carefully cultivated and reverently burned, was a central element in these profound and potent rituals. The smoke you perceive curling around the shaman, The very air you breathe within this tent is laden with the echoes of these ancient practices. The people observed these shamans, their eyes wide with reverence and awe, believing they witnessed true prophets soaring through the spirit world. In truth, what you are witnessing is a powerful psychotropic effect. The compounds in the burning herbs and resins induce profound, altered states of consciousness, transforming the shamans from earthly guides into figures who, in their own minds, truly did fly high above the steppes, conversing with unseen entities, receiving visions that would shape the destiny of their tribes. The line between spiritual devotion and pharmacological influence blurs beautifully in this setting. It's a thought that brings a wry smile, a piece of dark humor from the ancient world. In Mongolia, you didn't need a doctor's prescription, nor did you need to venture far for remedies. All you required was smoke, thick enough to confuse not just the human mind, but perhaps even the horses grazing innocently nearby. A testament to the pervasive, unfiltered presence of these potent substances in the fabric of their daily and spiritual existence. And as the drumbeat softens and the smoke slowly disperses, you are left with the lingering scent and the profound realization of a world where the sacred and the chemical intertwined in ways we are only just beginning to understand. The air inside the yurt still carries the memory of the shaman's smoke. But now, a different aroma begins to assert itself. It's a scent both sharp and subtly sweet, a tang that speaks of fermentation and the raw, untamed spirit of the steppe. You watch as a weathered hand offers you a bowl, not of water, but of something milky and opaque, with a faint effervescence rising to its surface. This is Airag, the lifeblood of the Mongol people, a drink as integral to their existence as the horses that gallop across their boundless horizons. You lift the bowl, feeling its cool weight. This is fermented mare's milk, meticulously prepared and cherished, with an alcohol content typically ranging from 2 to 3%. It's not overwhelmingly potent, yet its cumulative effect is undeniable. Marco Polo, the legendary Venetian traveler, once described this unique beverage with a sense of wonder, calling it horse wine that lifts the spirit. And indeed, as you take a tentative sip, you can feel a warmth spread through you, a subtle easing of the cold that always seems to linger at the edges of life on the steppe. Consider the harsh realities of winter here. Imagine the biting winds howling across the endless plains, temperatures plummeting to a brutal 22 degrees or even colder. In such conditions, water could freeze solid in an instant, and life itself became a desperate struggle against the elements. Airag was more than a beverage. It was liquid survival. Its fermented nature meant it wouldn't freeze as readily as plain water, providing crucial hydration and a small, but vital, caloric boost. It offered a fleeting moment of warmth in the bitter chill, a comfort that transcended mere sustenance. It became a necessity, a way to fend off the insidious creep of frostbite and the gnawing ache of hunger. As you gaze around the yurt, you begin to understand the rhythm of nomadic life. Every single yurt, whether stationary for a season or packed for migration, doubled as a mobile brewery. It was a marvel of practicality and resourcefulness. The herds of mares that grazed outside, their coats thick against the wind, were not just a means of transport or a source of meat. They were living, breathing beer factories. The process of milking the mares, then carefully fermenting their rich milk in large leather bags, was a constant, essential task. A continuous cycle that ensured a steady supply of this vital drink. Yet, like many things that offer comfort and survival. Airag held a darker side. While moderate consumption was a blessing, overindulgence could lead to serious consequences. The natural laxative properties of fermented milk, combined with the dehydrating effects of alcohol, meant that excessive drinking could result in severe diarrhea and dangerous dehydration. In a land where medical aid was sparse and conditions unforgiving, such complications could, and often did, prove fatal. The very sustenance that kept them alive could, in excess, also lead them towards death, a cruel irony of life on the edge. It's a detail that, once again, brings a touch of gallows humor to mind. The Mongols, in their infinite practicality and intimate connection with the land, didn't bother with fixed breweries. Why would they, when they possessed entire, living herds of mares, constantly on the move, serving as their boundless, natural beer factories? It underscores the deep integration of this unique beverage into every facet of their existence, from the mundane to the life-saving. As the warmth of the Airag spreads through your body, you feel a connection to these ancient people, understanding a little more of their ingenious adaptations and the subtle dangers that walked hand in hand with their survival. The scent of Airag still lingers gently in the air, a familiar comfort. But now, as you step out of the yurt and feel the vast expanse of the steppe unfurl around you, a different, more ancient aroma begins to drift on the wind. It's an herbaceous, slightly sweet, an unmistakably pungent smell, the unmistakable perfume of cannabis. You look towards a small gathering around a crackling fire, the flames dancing against the deepening twilight, and understand that this plant, far from being hidden, was an integral part of the landscape and the very fabric of life here. Across the sprawling, untamed lands of the Altai Mountains, wild cannabis grew in abundance. It wasn't cultivated in tidy fields. It simply was, a natural gift from the earth, flourishing in the rugged terrain. The nomads, keenly attuned to their environment, recognized its properties early on. They harvested it, not just for its fibers or seeds, but for its intoxicating smoke. They burned it in ceremonies, believing its purifying haze could banish evil spirits, cleanse the atmosphere, and protect their communities from unseen dangers. You can almost feel the collective sigh of relief, the sense of renewed peace that would settle over the camp as the sacred smoke drifted upwards, carrying away fears and uncertainties. Imagine, for a moment, the scene unearthed by history's patient hand. In those same Pazyryk burial mounds where the bronze cauldrons hinted at ancient rituals, even more exquisite golden vessels were discovered. Within these precious artifacts, after thousands of years, scientists found a faint but clear residue, the telltale signature of cannabis smoke. These findings, dating back an astonishing 700 years, prove without a doubt that the practice of burning cannabis in ceremonial contexts was deeply entrenched, a continuous thread weaving through the tapestry of Mongol culture for millennia. These weren't casual recreational uses. These were acts imbued with spiritual significance, performed with intention and reverence. The nomadic warriors, fierce and unyielding on the battlefield, were also human beings who carried the immense weight of their actions. After the adrenaline of raids, after the brutal clashes that defined their existence, they sought solace and reprieve. You can picture them, gathered around a flickering fire under the vast, star-strewn sky, their armor shed, their weapons laid aside. Here, they would burn hemp, not in a frantic search for oblivion, but as a deliberate act of relaxation, a way to soothe their jangled nerves, to quiet the echoes of conflict that reverberated in their minds. The smoke offered a gentle balm, a way to transition from the intensity of war to the quietude of camp life. Sometimes, to enhance the effect, or perhaps simply to create a more profound, aromatic experience, they would mix the cannabis with burning horsehair. This unusual combination created a truly distinctive olfactory signature, a smell that, once encountered, would forever be associated with the Mongol steppe. It was the scent of home, of ritual, of warriors finding peace. A complex perfume that spoke volumes about their culture and their connection to their animals. You can almost catch a whiff of it now. Carried on an imaginary gust of wind. A mix of earth, herb, and animal. Utterly unique to this time and place. And this practice of seeking visions or simply profound relaxation in the swirling cannabis clouds also gave rise to a playful, almost irreverent black humor. If Tengri, the all-seeing sky god, chose to appear to you in the smoke rising from the ceremonial fire, the saying went, it was probably just the stinging cannabis smoke in your eyes, playing tricks on your tired vision. It's a testament to their grounded nature, even amidst their spiritual practices, a recognition of the earthly reality beneath the divine illusion. As the sun finally dips below the horizon, painting the sky in fiery hues, you understand that these clouds of cannabis were not just smoke. They were threads of ritual, comfort, and perhaps a touch of earthly humor, woven into the very fabric of the Mongol spirit. As the cannabis smoke dissipates into the cool evening air, another, more potent secret of the steppe reveals itself. This is not a gentle herbal haze, but something wilder, more profound, capable of twisting perception into extraordinary, sometimes terrifying, forms. You imagine yourself foraging across the vast, rolling landscape, your eyes scanning the ground not just for edible plants, but for something truly special, something sacred and dangerous. You are searching for the Amanita muscaria, the iconic red and white spotted mushroom, a fungus steeped in folklore and revered for its mind-altering properties. This vibrant mushroom, with its distinctive cap, was not merely a curiosity. It was a revered tool in the elaborate Tengri rituals. The shamans, those spiritual guides who navigated the unseen realms, understood its power intimately. They would carefully collect the dried caps, their textures almost leathery from the sun and wind, and then either chew them directly, allowing the potent compounds to slowly dissolve and enter their systems, or brew them into a tea, creating a liquid potion that promised entry into other dimensions. You can picture the careful preparation, the solemnity of the act, as they prepared to embark on a journey far beyond the physical confines of the yurt. Once consumed, the mushroom's effects would begin to unfold, a slow, inexorable shift in consciousness. The shamans described experiences of incredible vividness, sensations of flight, of soaring effortlessly through the boundless sky, of conversing with animal spirits and ancient ancestors. The boundaries of their physical bodies would dissolve, replaced by an expansive feeling of unity with the universe. These weren't mere dreams, they were profound, deeply felt hallucinations, perceived as literal journeys through the spirit world, guided by the very essence of Tengri. For them, the sky truly opened up. This practice wasn't unique to the Mongols alone. Across the vast, frozen landscapes of Siberia, neighboring tribes like the Evenki and the Buryat also recorded the ceremonial use of these powerful mushrooms. Their own ancient traditions spoke of consuming Amanita muscaria to meet the spirits, to gain wisdom, to heal, and to navigate the complexities of their spiritual cosmology. When you consider the cultural exchange that naturally occurred across these nomadic territories, it becomes clear how these practices, these powerful mushroom rituals, were adopted and integrated into Mongolian ceremonies. However, the experience of these mushrooms was not always one of serene flight and divine communion. Their effects could be unpredictable, intense, and often overwhelming. What began as a solemn ritual could, with the wrong dosage or in a susceptible mind, quickly descend into communal chaos. Imagine the vibrant, disorienting visuals, the distorted perceptions, the intense emotional swings. A gathering meant for spiritual enlightenment could easily become a scene of confusion, wild laughter, fear, or profound disorientation, binding the participants together in a shared hallucinatory madness. And so, another piece of the dark, almost absurd humor of the steppe emerges from these experiences. Imagine one single mushroom. The whispers would go, a hint of awe and terror in the voice. And it could turn a disciplined cavalry charge, a formation of the most feared warriors on earth, into nothing more than a chaotic circus show. It's a vivid image, almost comical in its absurdity, of warriors losing their bearings, their courage, their very sense of reality, all because of a small, red and white fungi. As you consider this, you realize the fine line these people walked between the sacred and the perilous, between divine insight and utter pandemonium, all orchestrated by the humble, yet mighty, mushroom. The heady haze of cannabis and the wild visions induced by mushrooms represent one facet of the steppe's hidden pharmacopoeia. But now, you are led into a darker, more treacherous realm, where the subtle art of healing could easily be twisted into the sinister act of taking a life. Within the Mongol world, the knowledge of potent herbs and resins extended beyond their psychotropic or medicinal properties. It encompassed their deadly potential, transforming them into silent weapons, poisons lurking within the most innocuous of vessels. Imagine the intricate dance of diplomacy and power, often played out around a feast table. The secret history of the Mongols, that invaluable chronicle of their early empire, contains chilling references to poisoning incidents at banquets. These weren't crude, overt attacks, but acts of subtle treachery, executed with cunning and precision. You can almost feel the tension in the air, the underlying currents of suspicion even amidst apparent conviviality, as powerful figures gathered to share food and drink. The brilliance, and indeed the horror, of these poisoned offerings lay in their camouflage. Poisons, derived from various plants and perhaps even animal venoms, would be carefully, almost imperceptibly, hidden within bowls of Airag, the very drink that symbolized hospitality and sustained life. The victim would sip, perhaps even enjoy, their fermented mare's milk, unaware that each swallow brought them closer to an untimely end. The slow onset of symptoms, often mimicking natural illness, stomach cramps, weakness, respiratory distress, would ensure that death, when it came, appeared to be nothing more than a sudden, tragic ailment, a natural passing. And the narrative surrounding these deaths was carefully constructed. Those who succumbed to these silent assassinations were not mourned as victims of murder. Instead, their passing was framed as a sacred event, their souls believed to be offered to Tengri, the sky god. This cultural interpretation served a dual purpose. It preserved the honor of the deceased. avoiding the shame of poisoning, and, more importantly, it insulated the perpetrator from suspicion, cloaking the act in an aura of divine will. You can almost hear the solemn pronouncements, the rituals performed, obscuring the grim truth hidden beneath the surface. This chilling reality gives rise to another shard of the Mongols' dark humor, a morbid wit honed by hardship and cunning. No one was ever truly murdered at a Mongol feast, the knowing whispers would suggest. They were simply extended one extra, profoundly honorable drink, a drink that perhaps, in its final potency, guided them directly to Tengri's celestial yurt. It's a stark, almost poetic way of describing a brutal reality, an acceptance of death as a part of life, even when hastened by human hands hidden in plain sight. As you contemplate the subtle danger lurking in every shared bowl, you realize that even acts of hospitality in the Mongol world could conceal the most profound betrayals, a testament to their complex and often ruthless pragmatism. The whispers of poisons and the earthy scent of wild herbs now give way to an exotic, sweet, and faintly bitter aroma that signifies something truly foreign, something carried across vast distances. You stand at a bustling trading post, not just imagining the clatter of hooves and the rustle of silks, but truly experiencing the vibrant tapestry of the Silk Road. Here, amidst the precious commodities and cultural exchange, a darker, more insidious cargo journeyed across the immense steppe opium. This potent substance, a solidified extract from the poppy flower, made its arduous journey from the distant lands of China and India. Caravans, laden with treasures, would traverse thousands of miles, navigating treacherous mountain passes and endless deserts, bringing not just luxurious silks, fragrant spices, and delicate porcelain, but also the dense, dark blocks of opium. You can almost see the heavily burdened camels, their measured steps echoing across the arid plains, carrying within their chests not just the visible wealth of the East, but also the hidden seeds of comfort and addiction. Opium, in this era, was pressed into compact, manageable bricks, its value comparable to, and sometimes even surpassing, that of gold. It was a commodity that held immense worth, not just for its psychoactive properties, but as a medium of exchange, a tangible asset in a world without modern banking. These precious bricks were carefully hidden away in sturdy wooden chests, often camouflaged amidst other goods, their true nature known only to the most trusted merchants and their clandestine networks. The very act of concealing it underscored its illicit value, its powerful allure. For the Mongol nobles, these feasts were not just occasions for political discourse and displays of wealth. They were also opportunities to indulge in this exotic new pleasure. You can picture them, seated on plush cushions within lavish yurts, the smoke of opium coiling elegantly upwards from ornate pipes, mingling with the rich aromas of roasted meats and fine fermented drinks. It was a symbol of status, a mark of sophistication, a way to drift into a state of serene detachment, far removed from the harsh realities of the world outside. For the soldiers, facing unimaginable cold on their long campaigns, opium offered a grim kind of solace. A small dose could numb the pain of freezing extremities, dull the gnawing ache of hunger, and provide a fleeting warmth in the face of the brutal, relentless winter. It was a chemical shield against the overwhelming discomfort of their existence. Archaeological investigations at Karakoram, the ancient capital of the Mongol Empire, have offered tangible proof of opium's pervasive presence. Fragments of pottery unearthed from these historic sites have yielded faint but undeniable traces of opium resin. These artifacts, once used in daily life, now whisper tales of a time when this powerful drug was not just traded, but consumed within the very heart of the empire. They are silent witnesses to the quiet adoption of a foreign substance that would profoundly impact Mongol society. And, of course, the ever-present dark humor of the Mongols found its way even into this topic. The Silk Road, that grand artery of commerce and culture, didn't just carry exquisite silk fabric for your garments. The old jokes would go, no, it carried something far more profound, something that wove its way into your very being's silk for your nervous system. A soothing, intoxicating thread that could unravel all your tensions. It's a clever turn of phrase, encapsulating the deep, personal impact of this new commodity. As you imagine the silent journey of these dark bricks, you realize that the Silk Road was not just a conduit for goods, but for desires, for comfort, and for the powerful, often perilous, escape that opium promised. The lingering aroma of opium, a quiet reminder of its journey along the Silk Road, now twists into something grimmer, more visceral. You are no longer in a noble's lavish yurt or a bustling trading post. Instead, you find yourself on the brutal periphery of a Mongol encampment, a place where the glory of battle gives way to the stark reality of its aftermath. Here, amidst the cries of the wounded and the grim efficiency of makeshift care, Opium and Airag transform from indulgence into desperate, crude forms of battlefield medicine. Picture the scene: a warrior, fresh from the chaos of a skirmish, lies gravely wounded, perhaps a deep gash from a sword, a fractured bone, or an arrow still piercing his flesh. In this unforgiving landscape, far from any established medical facilities, the concept of sterile surgery or modern pain management is utterly alien. What you witness instead is a raw, pragmatic approach to suffering. Opium, acquired from the caravans, becomes the primary anesthetic. You might see a chunk of the dark resin offered to the wounded man, or perhaps a potent brew made from it. Its purpose is singular: to numb the excruciating pain, to dull the senses, to bring a blessed, if temporary, oblivion. Alongside the opium, Airag, the fermented mare's milk you've come to know, is administered. Its mild alcohol content and hydrating properties make it a readily available sedative, a crude antiseptic, and a source of some comfort. The warriors, their faces grim, would be sedated, their bodies relaxed into a semi-conscious state. Then, on the hard, unforgiving dirt floor of the camp, often lit only by the flickering glow of a nearby fire, the gruesome surgery would commence. Crude instruments, perhaps a sharpened knife or a heated blade, would be used to cut open flesh, extract arrows, or attempt to reset bones. The scene is harrowing. You hear the guttural cries, perhaps muffled by the opium, but still present, a testament to the immense agony being endured. Around them, the incessant pounding of drums might continue, a rhythmic backdrop to the grim proceedings, perhaps meant to ward off evil spirits or simply to drown out the sounds of suffering. It's a brutal lottery. Some, against all odds, would survive these primitive interventions, their resilience a testament to their strength and perhaps a touch of good fortune. Many others, however, would succumb mid-surgery, their lives extinguished not by the enemy's blade, but by infection, blood loss, or the sheer shock to their systems, their final breath exhaled amidst the dust and the drums. It's a stark reminder that this barbaric yet pragmatic approach to medicine continued far beyond the heyday of the Mongol Empire, persisting well into the 19th century in remote nomadic communities. The desperation for pain relief and the lack of advanced medical knowledge meant that these harsh methods remained the only recourse for generations. You witness the sheer tenacity of human will and the grim calculus of survival in a world where suffering was a constant companion. This grim scenario also birthed a particular strain of dark humor, a way of coping with the ever-present reality of death and pain. A truly successful operation on the steppe, the grizzled veterans would mutter, a grim twinkle in their eyes, simply meant that the patient stopped screaming. Whether they continued breathing or not, well, that was a detail for Tengri to sort out. It's a dark, pragmatic joke that encapsulates the brutal indifference of life and death on the battlefield, where the cessation of suffering, by any means, was often the only measurable success. As you turn away from the scene, the faint, sweet smell of opium now seems less exotic and more intertwined with the raw, desperate struggle for life in a world without mercy. The echoes of human suffering fade, but the narrative of drugs on the steppe continues, revealing an even more surprising truth. The influence of these substances extended beyond the human realm, touching even the magnificent creatures that defined the Mongol way of life, their horses. You stand now beside a tethered mare, her breath misting in the cold air, her powerful form a testament to speed and endurance. These animals were not just mounts. They were partners, family, and crucial elements of military might. And sometimes, they too were subjected to the effects of mind-altering substances. The sheer distances covered by Mongol riders were legendary, their endurance almost superhuman. To facilitate these incredible feats, the horses were often given Airag. You can imagine the scene before a long and grueling ride, perhaps a journey of many days across vast stretches of barren land. The riders would offer their horses a measure of the fermented mare's milk. The slight alcoholic content, combined with its nutritional value, was believed to provide an extra surge of energy, a boost in stamina, enabling the horses to push harder, to endure longer, to maintain their relentless pace over countless miles. It was a common practice, born of necessity and a deep understanding of their animals. But some shamans, those who delved deepest into the spirit world and the properties of nature, took this practice to an entirely different, more mystical level, driven by a desire to imbue their war steeds with divine power, or perhaps to achieve a symbolic connection with the spirit world through their animals. They would feed the horses hallucinogenic mushrooms, specifically the potent Amanita muscaria that you encountered earlier. The intention was to create divine war steeds, horses that would ride into battle with an otherworldly ferocity, guided by visions, symbols of Tengri's favor. The reality, however, was often far more chaotic and devastating than the spiritual ideal. Instead of becoming divinely inspired war machines, the horses, under the influence of the powerful psychotropic compounds, would experience their own forms of delirium. Imagine a herd of these magnificent animals, their senses distorted, their natural instincts overridden by the hallucinogenic effects. Their coordination would falter, their fear responses would become erratic, and their perception of reality would be utterly scrambled. The predictable discipline of a cavalry charge would vanish, replaced by unbridled panic and disorientation. The result was often catastrophic stampedes of drugged horses, their eyes wild and unfocused, trampling everything in their path, including their own riders. What was intended as a spiritual enhancement became a tactical nightmare, a tragic display of uncontrolled power. Folklore from the steppes still recalls the unsettling tales of dancing horses that never stopped, stories imbued with a mix of awe and terror, recounting the strange, erratic movements of horses lost in a drug-induced trance, their bodies moving to an unheard rhythm until exhaustion or injury claimed them. This bizarre practice, too, became a source of the Mongols' stark, almost fatalistic black humor. Sometimes, the grizzled warriors would quip, a wry smile playing on their lips. The cavalry didn't even need an enemy to contend with. The horses, high on shrooms, possessed by their own inner demons and dancing spirits, did a perfectly capable job of neutralizing the fighting force all on their own. It's a chillingly humorous indictment of the unpredictable nature of such powerful substances, even when administered with the most sacred of intentions. As you watch the horses graze peacefully now, you are reminded that in the Mongol world, even the most loyal companions could be drawn into the intoxicating, often dangerous, web of drugs. The wild dance of drugged horses now gives way to the languid, aromatic haze of a new substance, one that arrived not from the high Altai, but from the opulent, sophisticated lands to the southwest. You stand on the threshold of an imperial court, a place of power and intrigue, yet also one where the air is thick with a sweet, earthy smoke distinct from anything you've encountered so far. This is Hashish, and its arrival marks another chapter in the Mongol Empire's complex relationship with intoxicating substances. As the Mongol Empire expanded its formidable reach, its armies pushed beyond the familiar steppes, conquering vast territories and assimilating diverse cultures. One of the most significant conquests was Persia, a land rich in history, philosophy, and sophisticated pleasure. When the Mongol soldiers, victorious and laden with spoils, returned home, they brought with them not just Persian gold and craftsmanship, but also Persian hashish. This potent form of cannabis resin, far more concentrated and refined than the wild hemp burned in their traditional rituals, quickly found its place in the Mongol hierarchy. The Persian chronicler Juvaini, a keen observer of the Mongol courts during this tumultuous period, vividly described scenes where these powerful gatherings appeared drowned in hashish smoke. You can almost see it grand yurts, perhaps even more elaborate than the ones you visited, filled with the thick, aromatic clouds, obscuring the faces of the khans and their advisors. It was a transformation of atmosphere, a shift from stern sobriety to a state of profound, often jovial, intoxication. Feasts, which were already central to Mongol social and political life, took on an entirely new dimension with the introduction of hashish. These were not just meals, they were elaborate rituals of bonding, negotiation, and decision-making. But under the influence of hashish, these solemn councils of war and governance could easily devolve into uproarious laughing contests. Imagine serious strategists, their faces flushed, dissolving into uncontrolled mirth, their usual gravity replaced by a giddy, uninhibited joy. The traditional decorum of the court was often forgotten, replaced by a lighter, less inhibited atmosphere. And here lies the most astonishing, and perhaps terrifying, aspect of hashish's influence. Key executions and military campaigns were often decided mid-high. You try to picture this a momentous decision, one that would determine the fate of thousands, perhaps even change the course of history, being deliberated and ultimately sealed by men whose perceptions were profoundly altered by the drug. Was it reckless, perhaps? But in their altered state, did they perceive a clarity, an insight, a fearlessness that they believed was divine guidance. The line between inspiration and intoxication blurred entirely, with profound consequences. This historical reality gave rise to yet another layer of Mongol dark humor, one that speaks to the sheer power of this new substance. Genghis Khan, the legendary unifier of tribes, the conqueror of half the known world. The saying would go, delivered with a conspiratorial wink. He may have conquered the world with his unmatched military genius, but it was Hashish that, in its own silent way, conquered Genghis himself, or at least his court, influencing his most profound decisions. It's a testament to the drug's pervasive influence, subtly undermining the image of unyielding power with the very human vulnerability to altered states. As the sweet, heavy smoke of hashish curls around you, you realize that even the mightiest empires could be subtly reshaped, not just by steel and strategy, but by the quiet, intoxicating influence of a foreign herb. The lingering sweetness of hashish smoke now morphs into an unsettling chill, as the story takes an even more sinister turn, weaving the thread of drugs into the delicate, often deadly, art of diplomacy. You are now at a grand Mongol banquet, an event designed to impress, to intimidate, and to subtly assert dominance. Foreign envoys, dignitaries from distant lands, arrive with their retinues, their hearts perhaps filled with a mixture of hope and trepidation. They come seeking alliances, negotiating treaties, or perhaps pleading for mercy. They are met with lavish hospitality. But beneath the surface of generosity, a quiet, potent danger awaits. The welcoming ceremony is impeccable. Envoys are ushered into magnificent yurts, presented with sumptuous meals, and, crucially, offered copious amounts of Airag. You see the bowls passed around, the fragrant fermented mare's milk flowing freely, a symbol of friendship and shared sustenance. However, unbeknownst to the foreign guests, their Airag has often been subtly, expertly laced with opium. This wasn't a universal practice, but it was a tool in the Mongol diplomatic arsenal, used when a particularly challenging or defiant envoy needed to be persuaded. Imagine the scene as the banquet progresses. The envoys, already perhaps weary from their long journey and the sheer opulence of the Mongol court, begin to feel the insidious effects of the laced drink. Their initial alertness gives way to a creeping drowsiness, their minds becoming foggy, their judgments dulled. Important treaties, documents that would bind nations and shape futures, were sometimes signed in this drug delirium. You can picture the foreign dignitaries, their eyes heavy-lidded, their resolve weakened, agreeing to terms that, in a state of full sobriety, they might never have accepted. It was a cunning and effective form of psychological warfare, played out with an innocent-looking beverage. The Persian records, meticulous in their observations of the Mongol courts, contain chilling accounts of these diplomatic encounters. Chroniclers noted instances of foreign envoys, seemingly healthy and vibrant at the start of a banquet, dropping dead mid-feast. You can almost feel the shock and fear that would ripple through the remaining foreign delegation. The sudden realization that their lives were at the whim of their hosts, that even hospitality could be a weapon. These were not natural deaths. They were strategic eliminations, carried out with a silent, undetectable poison. Yet, in a testament to the Mongols' unique cultural framing of death and honor, a demise at the Mongol table, even under such suspicious circumstances, was often declared an honor. The deceased was deemed to have been chosen by Tengri, to have been welcomed into the spirit world in a grand fashion. This served to gloss over any uncomfortable questions, to maintain the facade of benevolent power, and to send a chilling message to any future envoys across the Mongols. And even their hospitality could be your end. It was a grim warning wrapped in a veil of cultural deference. This profound manipulation of life and death, hospitality and treachery, inevitably spawned a dark, pragmatic form of humor among the Mongols. If you harbored any serious desire for lasting peace with the Mongol Empire, the experienced courtiers would advise, their voices low and knowing, then you had better arrive at the feast fully prepared, not just for negotiation, but for the distinct possibility of dying at the table, perhaps from a particularly honorable drink. It's a chilling reminder that in the ruthless world of Mongol power, even the most revered traditions could be twisted into instruments of control and elimination. As you reflect on the silent poison in the festive bowl, you understand that trust, like life itself, was a fragile commodity in these powerful drug-laced courts. The heavy atmosphere of diplomatic intrigue and veiled threats now recedes, replaced by a more intimate, yet equally disturbing mood. Seeing the interior of a family yurt, softened by the glow of a small fire, you perceive the gentle hum of daily life, perhaps the distant bleating of sheep. But a subtle undercurrent of concern often permeated these domestic spaces, particularly around the youngest members of the tribe. Here, in the quiet desperation of weary parents, drugs found their way into the lives of infants and small children, often with tragic consequences. Imagine a young mother, exhausted from the relentless demands of nomadic life milking mares, tending to the felt and leather of the yurt, perhaps moving camp multiple times a season. Her infant, restless or colicky, cries through the night, a persistent wail that gnaws at her frayed nerves. In a world devoid of modern medicine, sleep was not just a luxury, but a crucial necessity for survival and productivity. So, a common, heartbreaking practice emerged. Infants were given herbal syrups, concoctions often mixed with opium. You can almost see the tiny spoon, the thick, sweet liquid carefully administered, meant to bring a blessed silence, to lull the child into a deep, uninterrupted sleep. For a brief time, it might have seemed like a miracle. The child would drift into a quiet slumber, and the weary parents could finally rest, gathering their strength for the arduous demands of the next day. However, the delicate physiology of infants, coupled with the unpredictable potency and dosage of these opium-laced syrups, meant that this solution was a perilous gamble. What brought peace to the adults often brought something far more final to the children. Thousands of deaths, particularly among infants and toddlers, were undoubtedly misattributed. These little lives, extinguished by overdose or respiratory depression, were recorded as succumbing to fevers or childhood illness, common and accepted tragedies in a world with high infant mortality rates. In some tribes, a darker, more fatalistic philosophy emerged around these frequent losses. They viewed these deaths not as preventable tragedies, but as Tengri's natural selection, a harsh belief that only the strongest, those destined to survive the brutal conditions of the steppe, would endure. You can almost hear the quiet murmurs of resignation, the stoic acceptance of a fate that seemed beyond human control, even as their own practices inadvertently contributed to the grim count. It was a way of coping with unbearable loss, an attempt to rationalize the incomprehensible. And this stark reality, this quiet tragedy, also found its place in the Mongols' dark, almost brutal sense of humor. Mongol babies, the elders might dryly observe, a hint of sorrow veiled by wit. They rarely cried through the night. Instead, they simply overdosed politely, slipping away with barely a sound, making room for the next generation of silent, stoic warriors. It's a chilling piece of gallows humor that speaks volumes about the pervasive role of opium, not just in adult life, but in the innocent, vulnerable lives of their children. A silent, unspoken curse woven into the very fabric of early life on the steppe. As you contemplate the profound impact of these seemingly benign syrups, you realize that even the most fundamental human need, the need for a child to sleep, could be fraught with such devastating, unseen peril. The quiet tragedy of children's syrups transitions into another silent narrative, one that unfolds within the private confines of the yurt, revealing the struggles and secret comforts of the women of the Mongol Empire. You step into this domestic space, sensing the layers of responsibilities and often unspoken burdens carried by the wives, mothers, and daughters of the nomadic tribes. In a world dominated by men and warfare, women found their own unique, often clandestine, relationship with opium, specifically in the form of laudanum. Imagine the lives of these women wives of powerful chiefs, their days filled with managing vast households and intricate social dynamics. Mothers of shamans, bearing the heavy spiritual weight of their lineage, and merchant women, navigating the complexities of trade and survival. Their days were long, their emotional lives often fraught with loneliness, the constant departure of their men for hunts or wars, and the ever-present threat of scarcity and hardship. They carried the burden of their families, their tribes, and their own personal sorrows in a world that offered little outlet for emotional release. For many, laudanum, a potent alcoholic tincture of opium, became a quiet companion, a secret solace. You can envision a woman, alone in the soft lamplight of her yurt after a long day, reaching for a small, carefully concealed bottle, one spoon of the bittersweet liquid, and the gnawing ache of loneliness, the anxieties of an uncertain future, or the physical pains of childbirth and hard labor would begin to recede. It offered a gentle numbing, a temporary reprieve from the relentless pressures of their existence, allowing them a moment of peace, a quiet retreat within themselves. 2 spoons, however, would carry them beyond mere relief, transporting them into a different realm entirely. Their yurts, familiar and confining spaces, would transform into vast, shimmering dreamscapes. The mundane walls would dissolve, replaced by vivid visions, by feelings of expansive joy or serene detachment. It was a private journey into an altered state, a hidden escape from the harsh realities of their nomadic life, accessible only within the quiet sanctity of their own minds and dwellings. The world outside, with its endless demands, would fade, allowing them to drift in a world of their own making. This reliance on opium and laudanum became the silent secret of nomadic female life. It was rarely spoken of, certainly not openly acknowledged, yet it was pervasive. It was a shared understanding, a quiet nod among women who recognized the subtle signs of addiction in each other. It represented a hidden epidemic, a shadow industry of comfort and escape that permeated the domestic sphere, shaping the inner lives of generations of Mongol women. Their resilience was legendary, but this hidden dependence reveals a deeper, more vulnerable layer of their experience. And, inevitably, this hidden struggle, like so many other aspects of Mongol life, found its expression in the dark, wry humor of the steppe. The men, the whispers would go, often with a resigned sigh. They rode to war, their quivers full of bows and arrows, their hearts set on conquest and glory. But the women, they faced their own kind of battle, their own relentless war against pain and loneliness. Armed with their own powerful weapon, the quiet, unassuming laudanum bottle. It's a powerful, almost poignant image, highlighting the distinct ways men and women navigated the hardships of their world, and the secret strength and vulnerability that characterize the lives of Mongol women. As you ponder these hidden narratives, you realize that history often overlooks the private struggles, the quiet addictions that shaped entire societies in profound and intimate ways. The quiet, individual struggles within the yurt now broaden into a far more devastating panorama, revealing how the insidious tendrils of addiction could grip entire communities, transforming thriving clans into shadows of their former selves. You step back from the intimate scenes, viewing the broader sweep of the steppe, and witness the tragic consequences when the allure of drugs became an inescapable trap for entire villages. Imagine a once vibrant clan, its yurts dotting the landscape, its herds grazing peacefully, its people united by shared purpose. Over time, however, a creeping malaise begins to take hold. The men, traditionally the warriors and herders, found themselves increasingly reliant on vodka, a potent spirit that began to seep into the steppe from neighboring cultures. Its immediate, powerful intoxication offered a swift, brutal escape from the monotony and hardship of daily life. The women, already familiar with the quiet comfort of opium, found their reliance deepening, the initial spoonfuls becoming larger, more frequent. And the children, tragically, were still given their soothing, yet deadly, syrups. This widespread addiction created a devastating feedback loop. The once disciplined work ethic began to unravel. Herds, the lifeblood of their existence, would be neglected, wandering off, lost to the vastness of the steppe, their numbers dwindling, leading to impoverishment. The essential rhythm of nomadic life, the seasonal migrations, the meticulous care of animals, the intricate balance with nature began to falter. Families, once strong and cohesive units, would fracture under the strain of addiction, their bonds weakening, their ability to cope with challenges severely compromised. Eventually, entire families, once a visible presence on the landscape, would simply vanish, leaving behind only the ghost of their former existence. Chinese chronicles from the 14th century, observing the Mongols from a distance, began to record these unsettling disappearances. Their texts noted, with a chilling matter-of-factness, that tribes vanished like smoke in the wind. These weren't casualties of war or famine in the traditional sense. These were communities dissolving from within, succumbing to a different kind of silent warfare waged by alcohol and opiates. You can almost feel the emptiness, the profound silence left behind where once there was life and laughter. A chilling testament to the devastating power of unchecked addiction. And, of course, the dark humor of the Mongols, ever present, found its bitter expression even in this widespread tragedy. The vast, unforgiving steppe. The old sayings would lament, a grimacing smile accompanying the words. It didn't need invaders. It didn't need a fearsome enemy army to conquer its people. No, it simply needed more barrels of Airag, and later, more barrels of vodka. That alone was enough to lay waste to entire clans. It's a poignant, self-deprecating joke that underscores the profound internal threat posed by these substances. A threat that rivaled and sometimes surpassed the dangers from external enemies. As you survey the imagined landscape, dotted with the spectral presence of vanished yurts, you realize the devastating human cost when comfort turns into craving and individual indulgence becomes a communal catastrophe. The desolation of addicted villages recedes, and you are drawn back to the arteries of commerce, but not the bustling, celebrated routes of the official Silk Road. Instead, you glimpse the shadowy underbelly, the hidden pathways that crisscross the steppe, the dark routes, secret passages dedicated not to silk or spices, but to the illicit trade of opium and hashish. Here, away from the gaze of official scrutiny, a different kind of economy thrived, one driven by vice and fueled by demand. Beyond the well-trodden paths of the Grand Silk Road, a network of clandestine trails emerged, winding through remote valleys and desolate plains. These were the channels through which the bulk of the illegal drugs flowed, bypassing customs and taxes, making their way into the hungry markets of the nomadic tribes. You can almost feel the furtive energy, the hushed transactions, the constant vigilance against discovery as these precious, yet forbidden, cargoes moved silently across the land. Nomadic gangs, hardened by the harsh realities of the steppe and driven by the promise of immense profit, became key players in this illicit trade. They weren't exchanging livestock for everyday goods. They were trading horses, their most valuable asset, their very mode of existence, for drugs. A single, sturdy horse, representing months of care and training, could be exchanged for bricks of opium or potent quantities of hashish. This wasn't merely profitable. It was, in many cases, more profitable than dealing in traditional commodities like gold. The demand for these substances was so high, their value so concentrated, that the risk was deemed worth the reward. As a result, certain trading posts, strategically located along these dark routes, flourished not on the strength of their silk or their livestock exchanges, but on the relentless flow of drugs. These were places where the air hung heavy with the sweet, acrid scent of opium, where clandestine deals were struck in the dim light of dawn or dusk. They became hubs of addiction, drawing in desperate individuals and enriching the shadowy merchants who facilitated this trade. The official economy might have dealt in tangible goods, but the real wealth, for some, lay in the invisible, intoxicating currents of vice. And, of course, the ever-present dark humor of the Mongols found its way even into this illicit commerce. Mongolia, the seasoned traders would say with a knowing smirk, didn't just sell its magnificent horses to the wider world, a source of pride and power. No, it traded its horses for something far more intangible. Far more potent, it traded horses for dreams. For the fleeting, intoxicating dreams that opium and hashish promised. A currency more powerful than gold for those trapped by desire. It's a chillingly insightful observation, highlighting the deep psychological and economic forces at play. As you imagine the silent caravans traversing these forbidden paths, you realize that the trade of the steppe wasn't just about survival. It was also about the powerful, often destructive, allure of escape. The shadowy whispers of illicit trade now give way to the thunderous roar of the Mongol war machine, revealing an astonishing, almost terrifying truth. The legendary military prowess of the Mongol Empire was not solely built on discipline, strategy, and unyielding courage. It was, in significant measure, sustained by the very drugs that had infiltrated their society. You stand now on the metaphorical battlefield, sensing the immense energy, the relentless drive that propelled these warriors to conquer half the known world, and realize the surprising role of Opium and Airag in their extraordinary feats. Imagine the sheer scale of their campaigns, soldiers marching thousands of miles across vast, unforgiving terrains, enduring brutal weather, relentless combat, and constant scarcity. To maintain such an arduous pace, to push beyond the limits of human endurance, the Mongol military often resorted to chemical aids. Airag, the fermented mare's milk, served as a readily available source of mild intoxication, dulling discomfort and providing a temporary boost in morale and energy. But it was opium that offered a far more profound and dangerous form of enhancement. Soldiers would consume opium, either by smoking it or ingesting it in various forms, to stay awake for days on end. You can almost feel the heightened vigilance, the unnatural wakefulness, as warriors pushed past the normal human need for rest. Fighting in this state was often a blur, a waking delirium where pain was muted, fear diminished, and the distinction between reality and altered perception became incredibly thin. It was a potent, if perilous, way to maintain relentless pressure on their enemies, to conduct surprise attacks after days of forced march, to keep the war machine grinding forward without pause. Indeed, some of their most celebrated campaigns, their most astounding military victories, were achieved through what could be described as artificial energy. The sustained focus, the prolonged endurance, the sheer disregard for pain and fatigue afforded by these substances allowed the Mongol armies to execute maneuvers that would have been impossible for sober, unaided troops. It was a brutal, pragmatic advantage, leveraging the chemical properties of drugs to achieve unparalleled military dominance. Yet, like all such enhancements, there was a heavy price to pay. The moment the drugs began to wear off, the inevitable collapse would follow. Imagine warriors who had pushed their bodies and minds beyond all natural limits, suddenly crashing into profound exhaustion, pain, and disorientation. Their artificial energy would dissipate, replaced by overwhelming fatigue, extreme irritability, and a desperate craving for more. This cycle of intense activity followed by crushing collapse represented a critical vulnerability, a hidden cost of their chemically fueled conquests. This astonishing reliance on drugs in warfare, too, sparked a piece of the Mongols' dark, almost self-aware humor. The Mongol Empire, the seasoned veterans would wryly acknowledge, a glint in their eyes. It didn't just run on the incredible speed of its horses, famed throughout the world. No, the truth, the deeper truth, was that it truly ran on opium, on the quiet, potent power of that dark resin, fueling its warriors through battles and boundless miles. It's a stark, almost cynical admission, revealing the hidden machinery behind their fearsome reputation. As you contemplate the image of these drug-fueled warriors, you realize that even the mightiest empires sometimes build their foundations on the shifting, ephemeral ground of altered states. The era of opium-fueled campaign and slowly gives way to a new, more potent wave of intoxication, one that arrived not from the ancient roots of the Silk Road, but from the frozen, expanding empire to the north. You sense a shift in the air, a colder, harsher edge, as the familiar comfort of Airag begins to be overshadowed by the raw, unyielding power of Russian vodka. This marked a profound, and ultimately devastating. Transformation in the drug landscape of Mongolia. By the 18th and 19th centuries, the geopolitical landscape had dramatically changed. The vast plains of Mongolia, once the heart of an unstoppable empire, now found themselves increasingly bordered by and influenced by the burgeoning Russian Empire. And with the arrival of Russian traders, settlers, and eventually soldiers, came a new and powerful intoxicant vodka. This clear, potent spirit, far stronger and more rapidly intoxicating than Airag, quickly found a receptive audience among the Mongols. The traditional rituals, once centered around the gentle effervescence of fermented mare's milk, began to shift. You can imagine the scene at communal gatherings, at celebrations, at solemn ceremonies. The traditional bowls of Airag were gradually replaced by aggressive shots of vodka. The slower, more communal experience of Airag gave way to the sharp, intense jolt of distilled spirits. It was a cultural exchange with dire consequences, replacing a relatively mild intoxicant with something far more addictive and destructive. The combination proved particularly lethal. Feasts, once occasions for bonding and shared pleasure, fueled by Airag and perhaps a pipe of opium, now transformed into chaotic, often tragic, events with the introduction of vodka. The volatile mix of heavy drinking and the continued use of opium turned celebratory gatherings into scenes that often resembled funerals. Arguments escalated into violence. Accidents became more frequent, and the sheer toxicity of combining these substances led to alarming rates of death, both immediate and long-term. You can almost feel the rising tension, the unpredictable violence that now characterize these once harmonious events. Russian reports from this period, observing their new neighbors, offered chilling statistics. Their records explicitly noted that more Mongols die from vodka than swords. It's a stark and horrifying testament to the devastating impact of this new drug. The external threat of warfare, which had defined so much of Mongol history, was now tragically surpassed by an internal enemy, an insidious poison that was systematically decimating their population. This was not a quick, brutal death on the battlefield, but a slow, agonizing destruction of individuals, families, and communities. This tragic reality, too, found its way into the Mongols' dark, poignant humor, a testament to their enduring spirit even in the face of despair. Our horses, the grim whispers would go, a defeated tone in the voice. They froze to death on the merciless steppe, succumbing to the brutal cold. But we, the Mongols, we managed to drink ourselves there even faster, rushing to meet the same frozen end, propelled by the raw fire of vodka. It's a bitter, self-aware joke that captures the profound sense of hopelessness and the devastating impact of this new intoxicant. As you witness the metaphorical tsunami of vodka sweeping across the steppe, you realize that some conquests are not fought with armies, but with barrels, and their impact can be far more destructive and long-lasting. The devastating sweep of the vodka tsunami leaves a profound sense of loss, and now you perceive the chilling absence of intervention, a silence where voices of reform should have risen. In the Western world, the early 20th century saw significant legal attempts to control drug use, exemplified by acts like the Harrison Narcotics Tax Act of 1914 in the United States, which began to regulate and restrict the distribution of narcotics. But in Mongolia, a similar wave of awareness, a push for reform, simply never materialized. Imagine a land where Ancient traditions and the harsh realities of nomadic life had woven drugs into the very fabric of existence for centuries. Unlike Western societies, which began to grapple with the social and health consequences of widespread drug use, the Mongol way of life offered no established framework for such regulation. There was no equivalent of a national public health initiative, no burgeoning medical establishment to sound the alarm, no centralized legislative body capable of implementing broad-reaching controls. The concept of drug control, as understood by modern societies, was utterly alien to their decentralized, nomadic culture. Consequently, drugs from traditional cannabis and Airag to the more destructive opium and vodka remained unchecked. You can almost feel the pervasive presence of these substances in every aspect of life. Their open availability a stark contrast to the emerging restrictions in other parts of the world. Without regulation, without public awareness campaigns, without any form of organized intervention, addiction spiraled, unhindered, silently destroying lives and communities. The existing legal structures, focused on tribal law and tradition, simply did not have the mechanisms or the inclination to address such a systemic, insidious problem. It was not until much later, when external powers like Russia and China began to exert their influence and impose their own systems of governance, that any serious crackdowns on drug use were initiated in Mongolia. But by then, the damage was already profound and irreversible. You contemplate the generations that had grown up amidst this pervasive drug culture, their bodies and minds accustomed to altered states, their futures often tragically curtailed by addiction. Whole generations were, quite literally, lost their potential unfulfilled, their lives consumed by the relentless cycle of craving and indulgence. The delayed intervention meant that the opportunity for meaningful internal reform had long passed. This profound lack of control and the resulting tragedy also gave birth to another piece of the Mongols' poignant, bitter humor. The law. The elders would sigh, their voices heavy with resignation. It rode horses, slow and deliberate, often lagging far behind the swift currents of change. But the drugs, they rode the very wind, unimpeded and uncatchable, spreading rapidly across the boundless steppe, touching every yurt, every life, long before any human decree could hope to stop them. It's a vivid, almost poetic image that underscores the futility of trying to rein in such a deeply embedded problem without the necessary awareness, infrastructure, or political will. As you reflect on this absence of reform, you understand the silent, devastating cost of inaction, and how entire societies can be swept away by forces they neither understand nor control. The quiet tragedy of unchecked addiction on the steppe now gives way to the stark, clinical arrival of modern pharmacology, yet with a familiar, destructive outcome. You find yourself in the early to mid-20th century, a new era where the vast expanse of Mongolia is no longer untouched by the major geopolitical shifts of the world. As Soviet armies exerted their influence and eventually established a presence, they brought with them not just new ideologies and technologies, but also a new generation of powerful drugs, morphine and amphetamines. Imagine the clash of cultures, the imposition of a foreign system onto an ancient way of life. The familiar, organic substances of the steppe, the wild cannabis, the home-brewed Airag. The crude opium bricks began to be systematically replaced by their more potent, industrially produced counterparts. You can almost see the shift, from the earthy, hand-rolled pipe to the sterile gleam of a syringe, from the comforting flask of fermented milk to the harsh kick of vodka. Morphine, a highly refined and potent derivative of opium, quickly became the new opiate of choice. Delivered via injection, its effects were far swifter, more intense, and infinitely more addictive than the raw opium the Mongols had known for centuries. It replaced opium not only as a painkiller, but as a powerful escape, creating a new, more dangerous generation of dependency. Similarly, amphetamines, powerful stimulants used to keep soldiers alert and focused, found their way into the Mongolian population, offering a different kind of high one of relentless energy, often followed by crushing lows. Mongol troops, now integrated into or heavily influenced by Soviet military structures, found themselves facing the twin challenges of modern warfare and modern addiction. The old comforts of Airag and opium were superseded by the promise of immediate, powerful relief or stimulation offered by these new pharmaceutical agents. You can picture them, soldiers fighting on the front lines, or laboring in new industrial enterprises, their bodies and minds increasingly reliant on these powerful, prescribed substances. Soviet medical records from this period, reflecting the meticulous bureaucratic nature of their system, began to document an alarming trend: widespread morphine dependency among the Mongolian population. These were not isolated incidents, but a systemic problem, indicating how quickly and deeply these new, potent drugs took hold. The shift was profound from ancient rituals and traditional comforts to the stark, chemical reality of industrial-era narcotics. The cycle of addiction continued, only now amplified and accelerated by modern chemistry. And this grim exchange, this tragic modernization of addiction, also gave birth to a new, sharper edge of Mongol dark humor. The new empire. The whispers would go, a cynical twist in the voice. It certainly brought many changes. But one thing it didn't end was our need for the high, for the escape. No, it simply swapped out our familiar goatskin flask, filled with Airag, for a shiny, cold syringe, delivering something far more potent, far more insidious. It's a powerful, almost bitter acknowledgement of the continuity of human vulnerability to powerful substances, even as the instruments and forms of those substances evolve. As you consider the sterile efficiency of a syringe replacing the ritual of a pipe, you realize that while empires rise and fall, the human quest for escape and the dangers that accompany it often remain tragically constant. The chilling arrival of modern drugs brings us to reflect on the deep historical roots of these practices, revealing how the ancient use of mind-altering substances wove itself inextricably into the very fabric of Mongol folklore and legend. You now enter the realm of oral tradition, where stories passed down through generations shape the collective memory of a people, and where the echoes of drug-induced states subtly influence the narratives of gods, heroes, and spirit worlds. Imagine gathering around a flickering fire on a cold night, the wind howling softly outside. The elders begin to speak, their voices rich with history, recounting the great epics, stories like the secret history of the Mongols. Within these revered tales, beyond the recounting of battles and lineage, you find subtle references to strong drink and holy smoke. These mentions are not explicit declarations of drug use as we understand it today, but rather veiled allusions to the altered states achieved through Airag, cannabis, and perhaps other forgotten herbs. These were integral elements of the spiritual and social landscape, so naturally woven into life that they found their way into the foundational narratives. Folk tales, spun with even greater imaginative freedom, tell of legendary warriors riding high, their perceptions sharpened, their courage amplified, guided by spirit wolves or mystical visions. You can almost see these heroic figures, their eyes alight with an otherworldly glow, navigating impossible landscapes, performing incredible feats. These stories, while often attributed to divine inspiration or inherent warrior spirit, were, in all likelihood, born from the profound experiences of mushroom trips, the shaman's hallucinatory flights through the sky. Their encounters with animal spirits would have been translated into the adventures of heroes, blurring the line between personal, drug-induced vision and collective, divinely inspired legend. The wolf, a revered and powerful animal in Mongol culture, often features prominently in these tales as a guide or protector. It's highly probable that the vivid, often intense, visions of spirit wolves accompanying warriors on their journeys or leading them to victory were not literal divine revelations. Instead, they were powerful, deeply felt hallucinations experienced under the influence of Amanita muscaria or other psychotropic plants. The shaman's journey, filled with these potent animal archetypes, would have directly informed the heroic narratives, making the internal, chemically induced experience an external, cultural truth. And of course, this pervasive, often unacknowledged influence of drugs on their most sacred stories also provided fodder for the Mongols' ever-present dark humor. Perhaps the wry storytellers would muse, a glint of mischief in their eyes. The mighty wolf god, the divine ancestor, never truly appeared to our brave warriors in their time of need. Perhaps, in the heat of battle or the quiet of a ritual, someone simply ate the wrong mushroom and saw a vision that became a legend, a story passed down for generations. It's a delightfully irreverent, yet profoundly insightful piece of humor that challenges the sanctity of their most cherished myths, suggesting a very earthly, chemical origin for their most spiritual experiences. As you hear the wind whisper through the grass, carrying echoes of these ancient tales, you realize that the boundaries between the sacred, the psychological, and the pharmacological have always been beautifully and dangerously blurred in the heart of the steppe. The echoes of folklore fade, leaving you with a profound sense of the Mongol Empire's dual legacy, a tapestry woven with threads of both glory and a hidden, often uncomfortable, truth. You stand on the vast, open steppe, beneath the boundless, iconic sky that was once the canvas for their unparalleled conquests. The legend, the one whispered across continents and through the annals of history, speaks of fearless riders, unyielding warriors, their blades flashing like lightning, their eyes fixed on the horizon, embodying raw power and unstoppable ambition. This is the image that has captured the imagination of the world, a force of nature, driven by pure will and an indomitable spirit. Yet, as you peel back the layers of this glorious legend, a different reality emerges, one that reveals a more complex, more human story. Behind the steel and the thunder of hooves, beneath the banners unfurled in the wind, lay an unspoken, pervasive truth. The Mongol Empire's incredible expansion, its ability to conquer and hold vast territories, was not solely sustained by blood and iron, by military genius and strategic prowess. It was also, profoundly and consistently, sustained by smoke and fermentation, by sacks of potent mushrooms, gathered from the wild and consumed in rituals, by skins of Airag, the fermented mare's milk, providing liquid survival and subtle intoxication to men, women, and children alike, by pipes of hashish, brought back from distant Persia, creating languid hazes in noble courts, and by bricks of opium, traded along the Silk Road, offering solace to weary soldiers and a quiet escape to the lonely. These substances were not incidental. They were deeply integrated into their survival, their culture, their warfare, and their spirituality. The empire expanded with the ferocity of a wild storm, with the clashing of steel and the shedding of blood, leaving an indelible mark on the world. But it was sustained by a different kind of force, a more subtle, internal army of drugs. They provided comfort in the bitter cold, numbed the pain of wounds, offered courage in battle, and granted fleeting escape from the relentless hardships of nomadic life. They were the hidden engines, the unspoken companions, the quiet curses and blessings that rode alongside every warrior, every shaman, every family. And so, we are left with the final, poignant piece of the Mongols' dark humor, a profound summary of this forgotten legacy, the Mongol Empire. The whispers conclude with a knowing, almost ironic tone. Was not merely written in the stark, unyielding ink of blood, nor in the gleaming, cold script of iron and conquest. No, its deeper, truer story, its enduring narrative, was scribbled, beautifully and tragically, in the ephemeral, swirling clouds of smoke, carried on the restless winds blowing endlessly across the vast, timeless steppe. As you stand here, feeling the wind on your face, you realize that history is rarely as simple as legends suggest, and that even the greatest empires can harbor the most profound and often unexpected secrets within their very foundations.